Hey everybody, it's Steve. How's it going? You've stumbled accidentally or on purpose into still working it out, comma, life on the road. And some of you even know what that means if you've been with me a while. I started this channel a few years ago, but I renamed it like, I don't know, 2 or 3 times. Just because, it's basically refining. But it's all about the fact that I've lived an adventurous life, more so than normal, I think, than average, because I've never had kids, and I've always had, I've never had money. I've never had, I wasn't raised with, people that had money or kind of thing. But we were middle class. My dad was an electrician and he made a good wage. He was a union electrician that repaired elevators, like people elevators. So that was in the 70s, he was making 20 something an hour, give you an idea. Some people, when I say in the 70s, it might as well be the 1870s because you're young enough to where that you hadn't been born for 20 years or whatever. But I was born in the 60s, I know. In one of the most tumultuous times in our nation's history. Civil rights, all that stuff, Vietnam War, was basically just getting going. And it was at its peak of brutality, Even though we left with our tails between our legs, running as fast as we could to get out of there, we should have never been there, The ideals that was sold to America, I'm not going to really get into that much, but like everything else, my dad used to do this to me all the time, but they pitched us on why we should approve it, why we should be all for it, and it was all bullshit. They had ulterior motives, big time. But that's how government and people work, Government has to constantly try to pitch shit to us so that we can, so that we'll approve it, especially in a democracy where that we have to vote on things and where that we have representatives and things like that. Sorry, I had to get up and make move something. I know I've already started off this talk with crazy stuff. So halting the process. So my channel, still working it out, life on the road. Please like and subscribe it if you like the channel. Don't do any of that if you don't like what you see. Just drop it like a hot rock. Remember, morbid curiosity is not a good thing. It might be tempting. It's like an addictive drug, as you're driving past the accident that's being handled by the EMTs or whatever, but you can't help but look at the people smeared all over the highway. It's going to haunt you. If you don't like it, don't keep watching, There are people that are bored or whatever, and they resonate with this, with me. The only reason I even started this channel is because I saw so many other people, and I still to this day see tons and tons of people on YouTube and stuff that I really admire. Several of them people were from other platforms, and I've just begged them to get away from those platforms and come over to YouTube just because there's much better coverage. One fellow that I really admire is named David Clayton. And he's out of North Carolina, and he goes by the last name of Boomer. I think it's a nickname, and but David Boomer. And I would suggest looking him up. He's really entertaining, and he always starts his videos the same way. He's usually standing in front of the flag in front of his house, which I have a flag in front of my house. Neither of us. It's kind of it's almost like a joke because neither of us are MAGA. Quite the opposite, in fact. But that we're our age group and the fact that we're Caucasian old guys, and sorry David for calling you an old guy, but you look like we're about the same age. You're maybe a little younger than me, but a lot of MAGA are made up by guys our age that are white, and I've been really, really, really exploring why that is. What would make anybody go to MAGA, much less people I know and love. There's at least one person, well, two really, that I would take a bullet for any moment of any day, and I would fucking do it giggling. But I don't even think they like me anymore, because of their beliefs in this new thing. And they're not stupid. I know better. At least one of them's quite brilliant, actually. And both of them are honorable people. I don't know the psychology. I've been really exploring it and stuff. I know a lot more about it. It's a trap that they got trapped in, and it happens more to guys of a certain age, and apparently it's really aimed at white people. But it's always surprising to me when I meet people that are Hispanic or black that are MAGA also, which I'm like, wow, what happened to you, But anyway, I'm gonna get out of that too. That's a whole nother. So me and rabbit holes, ADHD, right? I live in rabbit holes, and I just don't want to be there. I have to hear myself, and I don't like that even. But you guys definitely don't. So if you like what you hear, like and subscribe. That way, when I put out new videos, you see them. And apparently, YouTube thinks they're cool. For me, it's kind of a numbers game. I just like to see if more and more people are interested. The one thing I don't ever seem to get is comments. I think in like the 3 years that I've been doing this, I've gotten like seriously maybe a dozen comments ever. And a bunch of those people weren't even American. They're like from who knows where, China, Japan, things like that. I like everybody. In fact, I love everybody. You have to be a real asshole for me not to like you. Everybody has value. Everybody. So anyway, if you want to do me any big favors, or just entertain yourself, pop on there and tell me to fuck off. Or an actor one time told me I looked like Ron Jeremy, the porn guy, and he was not complimenting me. It was quite an insult, but he thought I insulted him, but I didn't intend to. So Robert Patrick, the actor, if you ever watch him on his stuff, I highly recommend it, because he's a really cool guy. But his hair, he has this thing when he's not wearing a hat, his hair goes poof straight up in the air. And I didn't know it. The first time I ever saw him, I'm like, oh, what the hell happened to him? It looked like he got electrocuted or something, and I said something about his hair. And I guess that's a source of angst for him. I didn't know he even realized his hair was looking like that. I thought he just took his hat off and his hair was sticking up or something. And I said something about his hair, and he actually personally answered me back and said that, why would he listen to a person like me that looks like Ron Jeremy? I love it. Anyway, so if you want to comment, that'd be great. Tell me your name and where you're from, mainly. After that, make it as long as you want. Give me suggestions. Whatever you want to do. I'm not going to get really mad at anybody unless they say anything really terrible. And the worst I would ever do is just block you. No fighting amongst people, though. That's what I don't want. And I follow a lot of people on social media. When I say a lot, I mean to me a lot. I'm not a social person necessarily, really. I don't seek that out. But there's like 5 or 6 people that I follow that I see their stuff pretty much every day at some point, just little tiny bits. I don't spend a ton of time on social media, but more than a lot of people. I haven't been able to work like a regular full-time job in quite a while because of my MS. I got diagnosed with MS a few years ago. And before I was diagnosed, it was actually really wrecking my work stuff. And I thought I was about to die or something like that. And so finally I started going to the doctor and saying, hey, tell me what's wrong. And I kind of had an idea of what it was already, but I was totally wrong. Anyway, it's been a saga. And so I've really been changing shit up. You know, I kind of moped for about a month after I figured out, you know, that it was that regular work was done. But I squared my shit away and changed gears and thought my way through the problem. You know, I worked the problem is what I say. My dad used to always say to me, work the problem. And he was an electronics guy. He was an electrician, but before that he was an electronics guy. And Navy trained. And so when you're looking at a schematic or a circuit board with 8 zillion different little components, if the machine's not working, and if you've narrowed it down to that circuit board, there's some component on that circuit board or a junction between one component and another that's burnt. You can flip it over and you can see all the junctions, nothing burnt, fine. You just start testing all the components. Something in there somewhere is broken that's making it not flow like it's supposed to. And all the little components do their own little thing to make the thing work. So when you're working the problem, you're literally going through one component at a time and testing each one, testing each one, testing each one. And when I say work the problem, that's what it is. That's what I mean. Find out what the problem is, you know, and outthink it. You know, if you got to, I mean, my memory's not awesome, but I try to be a really organized person, even though I have pretty heavy duty ADHD since birth. And I'll write things down, you know, I think in ink because that's the way I can keep everything I'm thinking straight and keep myself accountable and stuff like that. And I'll write things down like it's not that, it's not this. What are all the components to my issue? And then I'll write them all down and I'll examine each one of them and just decide what is the most likely problem, you know, that I'm having. And I figure a lot of shit out that way, you know. And there's a whole lot of normal everyday things that other people excel at that I absolutely am just like no good at all. I have a lifelong crazy track record of making horrible decisions in the face of beautiful and rare and wonderful opportunities, just turning them down flat and seeming like I'm not grateful for the opportunity, when in reality I've always been grateful for every opportunity. But whenever I've turned them down, it's just because I didn't realize what they were, to be honest, or how rare they were, how important they were. But anyway, I'm gonna kind of restart this a little bit. So I'm sitting here in Iowa. My home is in Clinton, Iowa, and which is right on the Mississippi River. And I mostly grew up in Oregon, state of Oregon, Western Oregon. But by the time I was 16, we had moved 12 times in my life. I had over 4 kindergartens. Well, I had 4 kindergartens. I say over because there's a couple that I'm not 100% sure of, whether they were babysitters or kindergarten. But so my life was pretty different as a young person as opposed to a lot of people I know, even my wife, who basically went to school for the first grade at the exact same town, little bitty town that she graduated high school in. For me, that's like a foreign language that I've never been instructed in, you know. Can't even imagine what that would be like. I've heard of it. I've tried to imagine it. I'm an empathetic person where that I try to put myself in other people's shoes, you know, naturally. But it is pretty interesting, the idea of it. But so I'm sitting here in Iowa in my house, which I've been doing a lot of work to lately. My wife's in Baton Rouge, where she's finishing up an assignment from her work, which sent her to this area that her company has property rental. They own properties that they rent out, and she's fixing their poor management, the local region's poor management. They're very underperforming, and so she's showing them how to do it correctly, getting everybody on board and training everybody so that then she can get reassigned elsewhere. And typically these are supposed to take around 6 months at a time. She's been working with me on this. See, that's my lifelong experience is doing a zillion different jobs. I mean, I've discussed that before in other videos, but I try to have a different job, and not just a different job, but like a totally different industry, about once every year or 2 years. I just love that. It's an ADHD thing, I'm sure, but I love the variety, and I love learning all these different things. And a long time ago, I decided that this life, at least for me, is going to be like an adventure, just one long adventure, where that I get to do whatever the hell I want, whenever the hell I want, you know. And if the only challenge in front of me is money, I know how to make money no matter what. I've had a lot of different kinds of jobs. One time I filled out a job application, and I checked all the skills, because they had this, in this application, they had all these skills listed that their particular industry would benefit from. And I checked the ones that I had, the ones that I was good at. Not the ones I've just ever heard of or dabbled in, but the ones I was good at and could teach. And the interviewer said, "How do you know all this stuff?" And I'm like, "Well, just had that kind of life." And, you know, and I sat with that in my head, I guess, for a while, and I realized, holy crap, there isn't a ton of people that has done that with their lives that I have. Because, and the biggest reason probably is kids. You know, you really have to, like my father, had to really buckle down and stay in one place, do one thing, work for the same people, whether he liked them or not, you know, whether it was interesting or not to him, because he needed to earn that money for the kids and the family and all that stuff. So I've been really, really lucky. Since I never had kids, I've been able to do anything I wanted. I've made tons of mistakes in my life. Got married and divorced twice to people I had no interest in being married or divorced with, you know. In both cases, my first two marriages, I knew from the get-go that they were wrong, you know. I mean, each of them, I knew them for like 2 or 3 months before we got married, kind of a thing, which is obviously not well thought out. But, and even as we were getting married, literally before we walked in front of the person that would declare us married, both of them, I was like, "Why are you doing this? You know, you don't love them, you know, like love is supposed to be, supposedly." And but it is what it is. I may have made a lot of mistakes, and I've learned from everything that I've ever done. And I think you learn more from painful mistakes that you make than you do from triumphs that you have. I always tell people that the product WD-40, which is an awesome product, I believe it's called WD-40 because it failed 39 times, and it was on the 40th time that the formula was correct. So you had this great product, but it took 40 times to get it right. And it's like the Post-it note, you know, where Post-its we see everywhere and stuff. That was a mistake. That adhesive on the back was a mistake made by 3M, I think. And it turns out it was like the least adhesive, and somebody still thought of a way to use it. So just because you make a mistake in life or something goes not to plan, it doesn't mean it's a failure. Not really, because you learn from it. So I'm going to throw out a couple little suggestions. I always do on these videos. The first is a supplement suggestion. I recommend going through some of my videos to see where I'm coming from on stuff, so you get to know me a little bit. So there might be a little more gravity with some of my suggestions, because you'll know how obsessed I get about shit and how much I've read over time, and everything that's interesting to me. I research to the nth degree. You know, I've been a pretty voracious reader since I was about 15. My first book was Lorna Doone, to give you an idea. My second book that I enjoyed was Ulysses by James Joyce. Really, my first book was, and this sounds cheesy, but it was the Bible, NIV Bible, which I read 5 times by the time I was 15. But my first fiction book was Lorna Doone, and then my third book that I obsessed over was Ulysses by James Joyce. And it just continued on from there. You know, high school really introduced me to a lot of really interesting literature, and it developed from there. I'm sitting here and I watch Pandora. I shouldn't really watch it. I more listen to Pandora on TV, my TV. And so I can listen to a variety of music, as opposed to people listen to the radio or stuff that's saved to their computer or whatever. Pandora is great for me because like right now I'm listening to a radio station. It's like a station I created and then I choose music for it. Pandora is a very inexpensive way to, it's kind of like insurance. It's very inexpensive, but it's worth so much. Pandora to me is that, so right now I'm listening to Miles Davis. It's something I listen to, a little bit every day pretty much. It's not all Miles Davis, 95% of it probably is. And then the rest of it is people that were his contemporaries and things like that in that kind of jazz. But I have several different stations. Anyway, music is the thing that soothes the savage beast, as they used to say on Bugs Bunny cartoons. But I was the savage beast because at the time, Bugs Bunny was always talking about the Tasmanian devil. And the funniest thing was when I was a little kid, prior to 6 years old, when I wound up in the hospital for one reason or another, ER, all that stuff, I visited more. I was a frequent flyer. Family members and family friends and things like that would always get me a gift. Cause sort of like you get somebody flowers when they're in the hospital or whatever. I would always get this gift from people, sometimes strangers to me. My parents knew them or whatever, but it was always the same thing. And I got to thinking, what in the hell? It was always the Tasmanian devil, like a little Tasmanian devil wearing a leather coat or little stuffed animal Tasmanian devils. I wasn't trying to collect them. I just didn't have the heart to throw them away. They were gifts. And at some point, I must have been 7 or 8 years old, and I must have had 10 of them by that time. Somewhere in my bedroom, or whatever bedroom I was sharing with one of the siblings or whatever. And I asked my mom, how come everybody and their uncle gets me Tasmanian devils? Did I ever tell somebody that I like the Tasmanian devil? Because I didn't care about, I probably cared more about Bugs Bunny than the Tasmanian devil. And my mom just got this look on her face and she realized, holy shit, he doesn't know. And she informed me that I was the Tasmanian devil. And I'm like, what? Sorry, go ahead. What's that again? Because I had 4 siblings that lived with me that I was growing up with, and I was dead in the middle. And compared to all of them, they seemed like, normal kids. And I was this little whirlwind going around the house, fucking things up as I went. That's the whole thing about that's why we can't have nice things. My mom would have said that more often, but her jaws would have gotten tired from saying it, Jaw, not jaws. I only have one. And it was funny. I sat with that for probably a year or two before I realized, holy shit. Examine your surroundings. Examine your memory. And I'm like, oh yeah, the rest of them are just boring. They're just stupid. What are they doing? How come they're not having fun like me? Yeah. Out of the 5 kids in my family, one of us had ADHD, and what a poor nightmare my mom must have had with that. But either way, everybody lived, I think, mostly. So supplements. Yeah, that's one of the things that I think I'm good at with this a little bit, and it's also a little annoying, is that I can be on camera because one of the worst symptoms of ADHD is somebody that talks a lot. And that's classically, that was my mom too, so I know where I got it, but shit was her own fault. But green magma, I don't know if you guys have ever heard of that, but it was I used to be kind of a gym rat in the 90s for a bit, and money went a lot further in the 90s, and I still spent $500 a month on just supplements at the time. I spent about 4 or 5 hours in the gym every day, and like an idiot, pumping iron and running and all that stuff. And one of the supplements I had heard about even a few years before that was called Green Magma. It's a powder. It's barley grass juice that's been powderized. That's important because barley grass juice is, it's a biological thing. It's been squeezed out of barley grass, and it will only last for so long before it goes bad. It gets rotten. So the way they figured out how to create it, make it, store it, and ship it and all that stuff was to powderize it. The problem is, though, the way things get powderized is they get heated up and the water gets boiled off, which a Japanese doctor, and I can't pronounce his name, but his started with a Y and his last name was started with an H. The company that made it was called YH Corporation. That's why I found out what it was later down the road, because I forgot about it actually, and then I refound it. Back in the day when I read about it, and I ended up doing a bunch of research on it, it was said to, the whole point of the powderizing thing is his doctor figured out a way to make barley grass juice powderized without doing the heating process, which made all the difference, because the best part about barley grass juice was the enzymes in it. And when it got powderized the regular way, the enzymes were killed. And then the most impactful thing about this barley grass juice was then killed. Okay, unless you got it straight from the barley grass yourself, you didn't get any of that. And to even eat barley grass, you'd have to eat enough of it to, fill your stomach 20 times over to get what one glass of it will give you, So anyway, he figured out how to a way to powderize that. If you're curious about it, message me and I'll tell you how. And anyway, so it's called Green Magma. I don't remember the company that makes it now. YH Corporation, I don't think exists anymore. I think that guy might have even died. But anyway, he was like born in 1948 or some shit. But anyway, at the time when it came out in the early 80s, they were doing work on it, and a lot of health nuts were using it and stuff. And one guy's claim was what really got my attention was he said that he came from a really healthy family and where that everybody was health nuts and stuff. And he had been that way. That's why him and his wife got together and all that kind of stuff. And all their friends were the same. And he was diagnosed with cancer. And he was really worried that it was going to mess with all their heads bad. And he caught it early enough. He thought he was going to be okay. Got into the chemo, got into radiation, but then he was worried about showing the signs and stuff like that. And so he just really started getting into his supplements, to help, hopefully, stay as healthy as long as he could. And the number one thing he found was Green Magma. And the claim that he made that really got my attention at the time was that during his chemo and radiation, he kept it a secret. He didn't tell anybody. And he didn't show any of the signs. Didn't lose his hair, didn't lose a ton of weight. He was already healthy, but he didn't become gaunt and sickly looking, because he attributed it all to the one major thing that he felt was really different, which was the Green Magma. And somebody else said that it was much, much more effective than aspirin as a painkiller. When I was taking Green Magma on a regular basis, and it's just you do a scoop in a glass of water. Some people try to put it in things, but if you put it in anything acidic, it damages the enzymes. If you put it in any like hot water, like you're gonna make, hot coffee, hot chocolate with it or something like that, again, that kills the enzymes. So I just put it in a glass of water, a shaker, shake it up, make it into liquid, then drink it down real fast, because it doesn't taste good. It tastes like grass, okay? I grew up on a farm. You know what it tastes like? It tastes like a cow pie smells. Yeah. That's what it reminded me of, so I had to choke it down. But I've had other people tell me, I guess who didn't have the upbringing I did with the whole farm thing, They thought it was great. It tasted like fresh, and I've heard this told to me before, so I'm going to tell you that it tastes like a fresh mowed lawn, which that's a nice way to think of it, I guess. But that's what they said it tastes like to them. Anyway, so green magma, supposed to be, lots of people that I know do their reds and greens every morning, okay? It's a red powder, which is like usually beetroot. It's really good for your circulation and energy level and stuff. And it's an antioxidant, really hardcore antioxidant, which if you know anything about health, you've researched that too. Green magma is also an antioxidant on steroids, okay? Meaning that it's a much better antioxidant than just about anything else you can take, okay? So every single day I do my greens and reds, which is basically just, in a shaker, I do a scoop of my red powder and a scoop of my green powder, which is green magma now. I actually was using a different green, which was a really high-end, like barley grass juice or something like that. But now it is green magma. And actually, I will say that, and this is not something I ever heard before, this is my own personal observation, but my mental acuity has become sharper, which has been a kind of complaint of mine for the last few years. That, I'm only 57, but I've had my bell rung. I used to box, and I've had my bell rung a zillion times. And the not joke is, it's at one time my count was 27 times. Some of those times I went to the emergency room for, because I'm basically surrounded by people that didn't know anything about that stuff. And some of those times I was around other people that were professionals at getting their bell rung. And so they just sat me down, kept me awake, kept me hydrated until everything was fine. When I say bell rung, though, I mean a concussion. If you get knocked out, you've had your bell rung. If you get hit in the head to where for 5 minutes or longer, you're a little woozy and, you're having a hard time focusing, you've had a concussion. That's getting your bell rung. I've had mine that I know of, and this didn't count when I was in high school and earlier. And I spent time in the gym in Eugene, Oregon, and then in Davenport, Iowa, at those ages. And probably had my bell rung a couple times back then. But, at least in the gym, you're always wearing headgear. It's none of that, bare knuckle shit. But once I got in the military, then all the safety stuff was gone because I was running my own life by that time, and I also started having a bad life, and so I got to the point where I had a death wish a little bit, and I just didn't care anymore, and just some really bad shit happened all in succession when I was 19, and it just totally changed how I was looking. I didn't have hopes anymore. I didn't have aspirations anymore, and I just didn't care anymore. And so yeah, I started doing really stupid stuff. I'm really, really, really stoked I never got into drugs or anything like that, because I don't necessarily think I would have said no at that point. I just was lucky enough to where that the right things happened at the right times, and I went from being basically a kid to being an athlete, and in not the best kind of way, really. But I did recognize at that point that an athlete needs to live in a healthy way to whatever degree, and that didn't include drugs. So I drank like a fish for a period of time, and I'm sure I was exhibiting all the signs of an alcoholic, except that when I stopped drinking, I moved from one place to another, changed jobs, changed everybody I was hanging out with. I mean, some drastic shit happened where I moved across the country. And since all that stuff was different, I stopped drinking mostly. I didn't even think about it. It was blind, just went from one thing to another thing. And so I wasn't I wasn't mentally dependent on alcohol, and I wasn't physically dependent on alcohol. In fact, it wasn't a thing. I never even considered it at all, other than let's go out, party, have a good time. And I think a lot of the times when I was, was off to work, hey buddy, let's go out and party. It was somebody telling me to come on, let's go and party, and it just fit my normal pattern, and that didn't change until my surroundings changed and I developed a new pattern. So one of the best ways, in my opinion, to get rid of any kind of addiction is to really change your scene. And if you're anybody, for that matter, anybody who's trying to get rid of an addiction, change your scene. Stop hanging out with the same people. Stop hanging out in the same places. If you can, move thousands of miles away, and stop doing whatever it is you were doing. Do something else. Don't just stop and do nothing, because trust me, there's a void there. That void will be filled with something. So instead of doing something like that, do something is equally as interesting but healthier for you, So anyway, that's my green supplement recommendation of the day is Green Magma. Okay? I highly recommend it. Anybody who cares about their health in any way, shape, or form, anybody cares about their brain health, anybody that cares about their cholesterol level, don't take statins. They're very bad for you. I gave those up a couple years ago, and they were hurting me. They were damaging me, in fact. But my cholesterol was too high. And so I've made a bunch of changes since then, and my cholesterol is now awesome. I just had a visit with a doctor, and they said, yeah, your cholesterol is awesome. So, and I told them what I was doing. So I made some changes. With that Green Magma knowledge, there's one book I'm going to recommend to you. Now, some people are big readers. But just like a bunch of kids I asked the other day that was going by their neighbor kids, asked them, are you guys big readers? A year ago, when I asked the same exact kids that same exact question, two of the little girls were just like, yes! And you could tell they were. A year later, I asked them that question. They're like, nah, not really. Things change, okay? You might not be a big reader. The good news is you can get that on Audible, okay? When I got a job driving, I started listening to Audible a lot, When nobody else was riding with me, I would listen to books because, better than listening to the same radio sounds you've always heard, even no matter what it is you're listening to. That is simply a distraction from learning. That was from, it's a bad use of your time. You could be learning stuff. Instead, you're just numbing your brain. You might be smoothing out your brain waves or whatever, but you're wasting your time by not learning stuff. The book, How Not to Die. It's a real good deal. My brother Vern, who is a real smart guy, sent it to me, and as usual, I didn't pick it up right away. But when I did, I started learning huge things about something everybody should know honestly by the time they're 10 years old. Our bodies are far, far more sophisticated than any space shuttle, any fighter jet, any Ferrari, anything we can create. Far more sophisticated. Except that with each one of those things, even my cell phone, there's a big instruction book on all the features, except not with your body. With the things that you're supposed to put in the fuel tank of the engine of your car, the things that you're supposed to put in the engine of your car. All those things come with instruction manuals, but not our bodies. There's a bunch of people trying to help us, but are they trying to help us? Because there's a bunch of food companies that are trying to get us to buy their products, but their shit is really bad for us. I mean, it's like they're actively trying to murder us through poisoning, through long-term damage to every component in our body, especially our brains. Had I known about the things that are in that book when I was 10 years old, I could have lived a lot longer than I'm going to live. I could have been so much healthier than I have been. I would not have developed diabetes, type 2 diabetes, which I have developed, which is saying something. There was a time when I used to run 10 miles a couple times a week, 5 miles all the rest of the days, a week, every day. You know, I could do 200 push-ups in about 2 minutes. And to do that, I couldn't just do push-ups because I would do them so fast that I couldn't physically just have my hands on the ground. I would have been lifting my hands off the ground to try to get down there quick enough. Instead, I had to do it in the grass where I would dig my fingers into the sod to pull myself down fast enough and to go up and down fast enough to where I could make 200 correct push-ups. And I mean correct push-ups, not bullshit push-ups. Military push-ups where your hands are shoulder width apart. You're going down, you're breaking the plane between your elbows and your back, where your face is just about touching the ground, and going up all the way, arms straight, down all the way, up all the way, down all the way. And I could do 200 of those in 2 minutes. I could do 200 sit-ups in 2 minutes. I would score 300s on my PT tests from about my 6 months in. 6th or 7th month in, I was getting 300s on my PT test every time I took one, which is that at the time, that was the best score you could get. And it was really simple. We had a really simple setup. It was push-ups, sit-ups, and a run. In your run, you had a 2-mile run, and you had to be under a certain amount of time. You had to get a certain number of push-ups within 2 minutes. You had to get a certain number of sit-ups within 2 minutes. And my goal wound up being what the max was, which was 200 push-ups in 2 minutes, which is 200 sit-ups in 2 minutes. And those were being watched and graded to make sure they were correct, to make sure that there was no underextension. You know, the little push-ups like this, that people do. Your back had to be straight. Your butt had to be lined with your heels and your back of your neck. I was an athlete. I could run, and I mean at a dead sprint through obstacle courses that a lot of people were having. I was running by people. They'd get in my way, and I figured out how to step around them. Even on really hard parts of it. I got obsessive like I do with everything. And I did really well. I was an athlete, a real athlete, and I don't know where I was going with that, but at the same time, the vitamins, the supplements, all that kind of stuff, it became really important to me. Even though I was drinking too much during a period of that time, you would never know it in the daytime. At nighttime, I'd be drinking, and I'd be stupid. I drank Everclear out of the bottle, until I got to a certain place of drunkenness. So then I could look like I'm drinking normal with people. I mean, tell anybody that now, me included, and that's a sign of a real problem, I don't know how many brain cells I killed with that. Never smoked weed, never smoked anything. I chewed tobacco, I chewed Copenhagen from the time that I was 11 till I was about 14. And it wasn't until I got an ulcer, and the doctor for some reason could tell, he probably saw it in my teeth or something, to tell that I was doing that as a child I was chewing tobacco because my brother Jim and his friend Barry talked me into it. But the minute he said that I had an ulcer, I thought I had an ulcer because of stress, but the minute he said I had an ulcer because of what I was doing to myself, and the next stage was going to be cancer, and he kind of gave me a little description, I threw the rest of that shit away and never touched it again. So I've made a lot of mistakes in my time, stupid things. But that book, How Not to Die, has changed my life. Thanks, Vern. I wish I'd seen that though when I was 10 years old. I would have read it. By the time I was 15, I would have read it 4 or 5 times. I'd read the Bible by that time. Once my dad got me that NIV version, I'd read that 4 or 5 times by the time I was 14, which made me stop going to church at 12. And I gave my father he was really, really, really into church and being a Christian and religion and stuff like that. He wasn't perfect, but at the same time, he believed. He was 100% believer, and he tried to live his faith. And when I pitched it to him that I didn't want to go anymore, and my mom's flipping out, but he's like, well, tell me why. And basically told me what he wanted to hear in an argument. What would be my reason, and here's how to frame an argument like an attorney. I mean, my dad was no attorney, he was an electrician, but he was a very intelligent man, and so he told me how to frame it. And so I did, and I came back to him, and I laid it out, just like you lay it out to a jury. This is why this is guilty, and I'm going to show you why. And then I laid it out clearly, and he said he couldn't really well argue with that really well, because I made good points, and he really did want to discuss these things with me later, because this was going to be having an impact on my whole life, which it has. But anyway, I got to stop going to church, and that was also awesome, because then I could do all kinds of other fun stuff outdoors while they were at church. And I didn't have to sit around and pretend I believed any of this stuff that they were saying. But I will say to this day, I am not a Christian. I was raised Christian. My dog tags said Baptist on them, just because I grew up as a Baptist. Since they said, what religion are you? And I'm like, I guess I'm Baptist, so that's what they put on. But I learned over time that it wasn't real, except that to this day, and I'm really proud to say to this day, I do my very best to live by the red letters. My dad used to tell me when we'd have our endless discussions about theology that whatever you do, no matter how much confusing stuff there is in the Bible and contradictory stuff and things like that there are in the Bible, remember the red letters. Jesus never said anything about gay people. He never spouted off about that. He never said anything about don't eat pork, But the things he did say are the things that make sense. And if you behave that way in your life, you're going to live as a good person. And he wasn't wrong. I heard somebody the other day say that they were on like a social media thing, said that they were a red letter preacher. Now, I instantly assumed that he was looking into my soul and was remembering I remember the red letters. Okay, he probably meant something else, like it's a red letter day, kind of thing. But if I were to say that I was religious about anything, my religion is the red letters. Okay, I do not believe that Jesus was a deity. Any more than somebody like Edgar Cayce was a deity. I absolutely believe that Edgar Cayce had some strange ability to tap into stuff that we can't see. Much like a radio taps into radio stations. It can pick up the frequencies that occupy the airwaves, And I know how that works. I was in a communications unit in the Army, and I did a lot of schooling on that. And later, and I knew a lot about it before I got in because my father had done a lot of educating me. I apprenticed for him. He thought I was going to be something else, but he passed away before I could finish my apprenticeship, and I decided to do other things, But since then, I've also continued to educate myself on electronics and what frequency is, the theory of frequency, the theory of all frequency, which all things happen to be frequency. There's a lot of things that I say, like timing is everything, but really everything is frequency. If you look at physics, every single thing is frequency. So when you think of it that way, and then when you look at how a radio works, Edgar Cayce could just somehow, he called it, I've read every book ever written about Edgar Cayce that I could ever find. And some of them more than once, just because I obsess. And once I read the words and once I understand what they're saying, then I try to read between the lines and imagine what was left unsaid, what was left unwritten. But anybody who's confused about religion, you're right to be. That just shows that you're smart. Most religion is I'm afraid to say, bunk. And I would happily testify to that in court, because I could prove it. I could argue it all day long like an attorney. I'm no attorney. I'm not really an intelligent person. Not really. Not overall. I'm terrible at math. Definitely no Einstein. But I have a couple of little things that I'm really fucking good at. And I'm just not going to get into that. What I wish is I was psychic. Bingo. I wish I had some Edgar Cayce in me. But there's a lot of study on that. Actually, I highly recommend. If you're confused about a religion, you're not alone. Partly is that it's mostly just bunk. Edgar Cayce was tortured by that. He was very Christian, from a very Christian area of the country and time, and he was really, really concerned that what was his abilities were the devil working through him. He was really worried about that. He was worried about his everlasting soul, everything that he ever read in the Bible. He was terrified that he was a medium and what that really even meant. I don't know that he ever solved it, that the Bible is 99% man-made, and really more than that. But anyway, this is Sunday, by the way, June something, toward the middle somewhere. June, maybe 20 something. I have a watch on with a date thingy on it, but I'm not wearing glasses, so I can't see the date part. And it's been almost an hour, which I usually try to keep these down to 30 minutes, but sometimes when I get into a subject, I just can't stop, or I don't think about stopping. So to recap on that, Green Magma, How Not to Die, that's a book. I've been doing a lot of writing lately, and some writing, and putting it on Substack. It's too long usually to put it on Facebook, and I think there's a bunch of Facebook people that wishes I would not put that stuff on there because it's too long. A nice person that I've admired a long time told me it's too long, so I'll take them at their word. But if you ever want to find it, you can probably look me up on Substack. And I've published 3 or 4 things now that have been researched, again, to the nth degree. And I'd be happy to stand by any of it. If you want, comment, and I'll be happy to discuss any of those things with you. I have a vitamin regimen every day. Let me see if I can rattle them off the top of my head. No, I can't. I'm not going to do that right now. I'll do that another day. I said this in the last video, there's this thing called 30-30-30, okay? If you want to get rid of fat off your body, you don't have to be very fat, just a little fat, but it's just a plain old good thing for your health. Within 30 minutes of waking up every morning, take a scooper and get a good quality protein powder, not full of a bunch of sugar. And put that in a shaker, shake it up with water, not something acidic, not something warm, and just drink it down, okay? And then have a brisk walk or a brisk bike ride or even on a treadmill, something like that, for 30 minutes. During that brisk walk, keep your heart rate below 135, but raise your heart rate up to where it's aerobic exercise, okay? So you want to be breathing. You want to know that you're working, okay? But keep your heart rate below 135. So heartbeats per minute below 135. But just barely below. So 30, 30, 30. It's the fastest way on God's green earth that we know of to get rid of fat is those three things. And it doesn't mean fast after that. It means do those things. And I would recommend for the first half of the day, don't eat anything else. Drink lots of water. Whenever you feel like having something in your mouth that's not food, or that maybe is food or whatever, instead of snacking, and don't snack anymore. There's a reason for that too, the scientific reason, is just do that. Your morning time is that 30 grams of protein, period. Within 30 minutes of waking up, drink down 30 grams of protein. Don't make it chicken. Don't make it anything else that you think is 30 grams of protein. Use a good quality, low sugar protein powder and water. Drink it down and then do a brisk walk or bike ride for 30 minutes with your heart rate raised but below 135. All that stuff is totally doable, and it is the healthiest thing you can just about do for yourself, besides reading that book and taking the vitamins that book recommends. So love yourself. Treat your body like the incredible machine it is. Be healthier. If you're healthier, you're going to be happier because your brain works on chemicals. The things that make you feel good are chemicals that come from your endocrine system. And if your endocrine system is working properly, you feel great, like you did when you were 11 years old. Okay? You want to feel like you're a kid again? I don't care if you're 65 years old and every joint hurts like crazy. You want that to stop? Eat right. Stop drinking garbage, poison water. And I hate to say it, I love soda. Love it. But it's bad for you. Don't do that anymore to yourself. All those acids and preservatives and stuff, if it kills bacteria in your body, it kills the millions and millions of bacteria in your body that you are supposed to have, that humans couldn't live without. Okay? So stop doing that to yourself. Drink water. Drink tea. Stop drinking Splenda. Again, another product I love. But it's a chemical, that's been manipulated. A molecule has been manipulated, and it was a molecule that our bodies got used to for millions of years. Hundreds of thousands of years at minimum. And our livers and bodies figured out how to work with that chemical until we removed that piece of that molecule. And now our body doesn't know what to do with it, and it messes up our liver and eventually messes up our pancreas and will cause you to become type 2 diabetic. Even though I was an incredible athlete when I was younger, I developed type 2 diabetes because I never recognized that sugar was heroin to me. And I was addicted to sugar before I was 10 years old. Horribly addicted to sugar. And nobody ever explained it to me because they didn't know themselves. Sugar is an industry. And as an industry, they made sure that everybody they could possibly imagine bought it and used it and got their kids hooked on it, like me. Separate yourself from sugar. Separate yourself from any chemical, anything that you put in your body. Except for maybe some medicines, because what are you going to do? Don't have a headache if you don't need to. Take aspirin. Take Tylenol. Be careful of what you put in your body, because good in, good out, bad in, bad out. You want to feel good again? Live like you were when you were 10 or 11 years old. You weren't doing all that chemical shit. The kids now are. Look at them. They're all obese. And the ones that aren't obese are unhappy, stressed out, little balls of adulthood like we see now. Remember when you were 10 or 11? Man, you didn't have a care in the fucking world. Part of that is because you didn't hurt and you weren't miserable because of all the endocrine system attacking your body's undergoing right now, because of all the shit we're eating, thanks to Kraft and Coca-Cola and companies like that are everywhere now, in every little thing we do. Free yourself of that stuff and you'll feel better. You know, return to eating like you were when you were a kid, not a kid in the 90s, but maybe a kid in the 70s. If you don't know what that is because you're too young, look it up. Eat better, feel better, be better, and don't give up on yourself. Don't give up on your stuff. If you have a business, keep doing it. Work the problem. If it's not working for you, if it's working you to death, in fact, figure it out. Because I can tell you how to do it, but you got to want to. There's a book to read for that too. And I'll give it to you right here. And that is called The E-Myth Revisited. My one and only time saying it this video. You're lucky and you're welcome. Okay, that's an hour. I love you guys. Don't give up on yourselves. Love yourself. Treat everybody with kindness. If you could choose to be anything, why be anything but kind? You know, if you could choose to be anything, why be a bag of dicks? That ain't cool. Every single person you've ever admired, ask yourself why you admired them. And then if it was for some good reason, if it were because they were cool, be that. You guys have a great day. I hope you guys have a wonderful week. Sunday, this week's going to be awesome. In about 1 week, I'm heading back down to be with Karen and my babies, my furry babies, and everything will be awesome. So, everybody have a great day. And like and subscribe, by the way.